Welcome to PLAAS Seminar Webinar Series. My name is Moenieba Isaacs, and I will be your host for the next seminar on COVID-19 and the impact on small-scale fisheries in South Africa and beyond. I have an exciting list of participants. My first participant is a dear friend and a fisher activist from a community where I come from. His name is Charles America. And my second guest is Rowena Europa. She's a community organizer and also linked to Coastal Links from Arniston. She's also a fisherwoman. And then I have Naseegh Jaffer, comrade, activist, and also leading Masifundise Development Trust, and also part of a number of international organizations and policies. So these are our exciting lineup for today. I'm going to I just want to say that, COVID-19 and small-scale fisheries is definitely a big impact on the fisher people, on fishermen, on their life, on their livelihood, on their food system. So we will get insights on how on their particular systems, on their lives. But also asking some particular questions as to why are they so vulnerable in terms of the impact on their livelihoods, and also what are the urgent steps government can take. And in terms of fisher organizations, what is the role of fisher organizations during COVID and beyond? So Charles will be on next, and Charles will have 8 to 10 minutes to introduce the issues. Can people in the background of you, we need a little bit of silence, and just to when you talk. So if there's any noises in the background, if you can just quiet it down. Thank you, Charles. You are on. I will disappear.
Yeah. Pleasure there. Thanks for having me, Moenieba. Thanks a lot for the group, and thank you for this opportunity to give some perspective to the struggles of fishermen. The COVID-19 pandemic has really increased or intensified the suffering of our fishermen, especially on the grassroots level fishermen, the small scale fishers, artisanal fishers, for example. They are in the front line of the hardship in terms of fisheries access and those things. So what happened was, with the emergence of this, the arrival of COVID-19, we've seen that the entire small-scale fishery sector has been completely confined to a much more difficult situation due to its relationship and links to the export market and the actual commercialization of the chain, the value chain in terms of fishing in this country. The premise on which policy has been based is essentially an industrial one, which then has a global arena as a market. Now, when a pandemic the size and magnitude of COVID affects a country or a market, it has that ripple effect right through down, or from the top down to the bottom grassroots ends. We have seen happen here in South Africa because of our almost dependency on the big business players as the marketers and exporters. We found ourselves being almost strangled by not having any access or any income to valuable markets for the period of the lockdown. So we find ourselves food insecure. We find ourselves completely insecure in terms of servicing the little debts and things that we have, and also how to run our households because we are completely, totally at the mercy of legislation and what could possibly be remedial interventions by the minister or the government in terms of fisheries. Um, I see a lot of suffering, and it's not unique or new to the fishing industry. If we want to look at the history of fisheries in this country or policy in this country, the policy by far favors an industrial, commercialized sector, which then has all these other little bit of links and strings, of which we are one subsectors, the small scale fisheries in this country. We have not been given huge amounts of quotas or quantum in terms of the total allowable catch, the TAC, but what we have could possibly have sustained us had it not been for the COVID-19 pandemic, the emergence of this upon our existing struggles. So we find it very, very difficult to make do where we find ourselves, and we almost being an invisible sector in terms of labor laws, legislation, and even legislation and even policy writing. We are completely invisible, and that leaves us leads to think that the middle missing now becomes that prominent sector that is in need of dire or very much support, help, and attention. We've suffered tremendously over the years, and what COVID has done, it's almost intensified that suffering. It's laid bare the vulnerability of our people on the ground, and thus far we have not had a positive response from government in terms of how can one mitigate or even soften the impact of this type of pandemics should they happen. And sadly, we were caught off guard, and government, having been almost comatose by everything, did not respond well enough, or at the time when we approached them and we you know echoed our plight of suffering of our people. So one can only imagine the impact on the ground, especially grassroots fishermen like myself and those that fish with me. Um, Although law, there's been certain legal interventions uh, for interim relief from courts, equality court orders. Those interim relief measures have completely been undermined and sabotaged by the influential players in the fishing industry that has a huge influence upon policy, legislation, and regulation. So we find ourselves completely struggling. We are really having a tough time now. There are some people worse off than myself that has been left out of the small scale fishery as well due to the incompetencies, the just the corruption and the mismanagement of that type of processes. So I feel so bad for them, because what we have now, we have a little bit of a concession given, a little exemption given to us that we can catch the fish. Then we have this um, for the problems of how do we discard or how do we sell our fish, how do we market these things. Those things have not been put in place, and it's almost that we need to nudge and urge the minister. The only person seems to be sympathetic is the minister, Barbara Creasy, at this moment, that comes to the fore and says, "Okay, let us change, let us alter, let us do." She shows a bit of flexibility, and it shows you that the policies could have worked for us all the years, but it was just selfish greed on the one side, and also that patronage and all those political maneuverings that has left us so vulnerable that hopefully, I don't know if anything can come from this. I would like to see that the government engage with fishers like myself and many others, and we work out. There is so much solutions. The academia has come up with so much wonderful solutions to this problem of inequality, poverty, and unemployment, and yet those things are parked. They are just shelved, and we carry on suffering the way we do. But should government show any interest in solving this problem, or bettering the lives of people like myself, and then we are open for those things. And thus far, we have knocked on the door, and the door's never opened for us. We'll find that they have the NEDLAC processes, they have all of these things, and you'll find fishermen, the most affected group, is missing in those things. And that makes it that our voices are never heard. We are completely muted and silenced out of the processes that could help us in improving the lives of our local fishermen on the ground. Coastal populations suffer because of the lack of access to food resources, marine fisheries resources. Those were traditionally the market and the providers of that food was the artisanal fishermen over the decades. Those things were all eradicated, all eroded. That we found ourselves having to satisfy a huge foreign market while our people starve on the ground. The COVID-19 has brought about only almost an expose of these type of things that lays bare the suffering of our people because of policy. But I'm not going to hop on that. I'm going to say that the effect on us as small-scale fishers due to the COVID-19 thing is that we are food insecure. We don't have programs, relief programs or emergency programs that helps look at us. There's a bit of fish in the northwest waters. Nothing happens here by us here in the peninsula. So it also creates another challenge for us in this pandemic crisis that we face. So I just hope that we can somehow have government take note of this, give us the opportunity to participate and also take our plight seriously enough to address this issue, that we never ever have to sit there and be confined to the precipice where we are not sure what's going to happen the next day to us. Our lives has been in a type of lockdown for decades. Since 1994, we have experienced a type of lockdown, economic lockdown, and all sorts of things where regulation and legislation has actually alienated us from something that I feel is a living customary right that we have, and that is to also feed our family through our occupations as fisher people. Those things were all taken out of the play. So we're suffering. We are really suffering, and I don't know how one can get somebody in government to just wake up to these things and do something about it, because we can't live by these type of food parcels and relief funds when there is resources that we can live from. We are suffering. We are really suffering as a people, and we I don't know how more to emphasize or to stress this type of thing. I see in our communities that the fishing sector in the communities they are basically begging for food. They're running around because the markets that they are almost they are all closed now. We are all beholden to markets that is controlled by a bigger industrial sector. So if they don't move our product, we sit here and we sit with fish, we sit with things other than just handing it out and still earning nothing. So that doesn't help us at all where we find ourselves. The other problem is...
Thank you, Charles. We will try to come back to you again. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for raising the issue of the challenges of the market, and in terms of your food system, your insecurity, and also situating that in your current challenges. The fact that from 1994 you have been in a lockdown.
Yes.
So, Charles, if you can move over to Rowena Europa, a fisherwoman from Arniston. Rowena is going to speak in Afrikaans, and I'm going to summarize her Afrikaans afterwards. Thank you, Rowena. You are next. You've got about 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Moenieba. Yes, ek wil dit byvoeg by wat Charles gesê het, in die impak wat die COVID-19 op die kleinskaalse vissers het, en veral vroue. Ons staar 'n dubbele bedreiging in die oë in hierdie krisis en hierdie epidemie, dat ons al reeds benadeel word in hierdie samelewing, byvoorbeeld met werke en veral in die visbedryf. Ons is die moeders van die huis, die mamas van die huis, die vroue. En ons bestuur ons huis. En as daar nie inkomste is, as daar nie kos is nie, dan gaan dit moeilik. Met ander woorde, al die verantwoordelikheid wat ons het as vroue, as op ons skouers, van ons huishouding en ook van ons kinders, van ons families. En dit is regtig waar 'n bekommernis vir ons as vroue. Ons as vroue is ons het soveel betrokkenheid in ons gemeenskappe, in ons huise, tot die see. En soos u kan sien in hierdie tyd, in hierdie lockdown tyd, is dit moeilik vir ons om te oorleef. Ons is betrokke by die voor en die naoes van ons visspesies. Ons doen die skoonmaak van vis. Ons het verskillende aktiwiteite wat ons doen in die visbedryf. Byvoorbeeld die vrouegroepe hier in ons gemeenskappe doen die art and craft. Hulle kook die jams. Hulle doen die seekosse, kook die seekosse, verkoop dit. Die verpakking daarvan. En alles. En met hierdie beperking op ons lewensstyl maak dit vir ons moeilik om 'n inkomste te genereer. En dit is regtig waar vir ons 'n bekommernis. Baie van ons vroue langs die kus, Eastern Cape, KZN, is afhanklik van die see. Hulle alledaagse lewe is mossels uithaal, skulpvis uithaal. En hulle voel so bedreig want hulle was weggejaag in hierdie tyd. Jy word weggejaag van die see af volgens hierdie COVID-regulasies dat jy nie meer kan see toe gaan nie. En indien jy gaan, is 'n groot risk vir ons vroue. Want as jy gevang word, kan jy opgesluit word. So ja, die COVID-19 het 'n groot impak op ons gemeenskappe as vroue. En baie van ons vroue, of baie van ons mense hier van ons gemeenskap op die social grants, kindertoelaag byvoorbeeld. En dat soos julle weet, is 'n druppel in die emmer. Ja, social department of verskillende instansies probeer die kospakkies uitgee, maar dit bereik nie almal nie. So daar is van die gemeenskappe en wat honger ly. Daar is van die gemeenskappe wat swaar kry. Daar is van die gemeenskappe wat nie kospakkies kry nie. En vir jou as 'n gemeenskap leier of soos ek is die voorsitter van Kloosterlings, en dit maak dit moeilik om die gemeenskap in die oë te staar. Jy voel magteloos. En daar is niks wat jy kan bied vir die mense nie. En in nou se samelewing of soos nou met die lockdown period, as ons is gewoonlik in die vorige tyd, ons gewoonlik kan ons hawe toe gaan, maar nou kan ons glad nie hawe toe gaan nie. Want as ons daar kom, jy mag nie toegelaat word nie. Jy kan nie toegelaat word op die hawens nie. Want dan het ons nog vis gaan soek om te verkoop en ook om te koop, om te voorberei vir jou families. Maar die regulasies nou van die COVID, van die lockdown, jy kan nie ingaan nie. Jy kan nie die aktiwiteite wat jy in die visbedryf gedoen het, kan jy nie meer doen nie. Die inkomste wat jy genereer het, kan jy nie meer nie. Ons in Arniston is die meeste inkomste vir ons as gemeenskap kom uit die see uit. En op die oomblik die bote gaan see toe, vang hier en daar, die virus is so lekker nie, en die vroue kan nie eers na die hawe toe gaan nie, om die man se vis te verkoop nie, en om voorbereiding vir hulle families te tref nie. Julle weet ons mamas, as maas in ons huise, ons sal nooit toesien dat ons families of ons kinders so nog kos gaan slaap nie. Dit is een ding, 'n ma het omgejaard, ons as vroue het omgejaard. Ons sal nooit toesien dat ons families eerste, wat in jou dorp is, of ander gemeenskappe wat jy ken, wat jy weet, ander families wat jy weet. Ek kan nie slaap, as ek weet my suster of my families in Arniston het nie kos nie. En dit is baie moeilik vir ons as vroue, ons dra 'n groot verantwoordelikheid. Ons bestuur ons huise. Ons doen enige iets om 'n inkomste te genereer, om vir ons families te voorsien. Ek doen 'n versoek op Barbara Krisie, die minister, om regtig te kyk na die vissersregte en om vir die vroue regtig te bemagtig, om hulle te help met die kelp, die uitgee van visregte, met die kelp, met die alkirke, die skulpvisspesies. Daar is soveel wat ons kan benut van die see. Ek doen 'n beroep op haar om die bemarking vir ons uit te sorg, om te help met die bemarking van ons aktiwiteite, om ons so goed te verkoop, om ons so goed te in 'n breër, om vir ons 'n breër opleiding te gee, om vir ons regtig te help om ons so goed te promote en te verkoop, om 'n goeie inkomste te genereer. Op die oomblik is ek 'n IR visservrou en ek is bekommerd, ek is ook die verteenwoordiger en ek is bekommerd oor die IR permitte, want die IR permitte, dis waarvan ons mense leef en op die oomblik Die regulasies het ons nie toegelaat of laat ons nie toe om ons permitte, ons kreef te gaan vang en ons goed in 'n goeie prys te kry vir ons kreef om te verkoop. Want die export is 'n probleem, die marketing is 'n probleem. En jy sien geen van die bemarkers, die buyers wat nou om ons te help nie. So ons is gestak. Daar is geen ander inkomste nie. Ons mag nou see toe gaan, maar die prys, want ons kan nie uit export nie. So met ander woorde, die pryse is so laag wat ons doen. Ons en anders is ver van die area af wat ons moet vervoer as transport. Ek meen elke dag as die kinders nou by die huis gewees. En weet jy hoe hartseer is dit wanneer 'n kind vir jou sê, "Mamma, is daar nie iets om te eet nie?" En jy is half te bang om te antwoord, want daar's nie 'n snytjie brood nie, of die brood wat daar is vir die aand. Jy moet dit so wegsit vir die aand. So ek vra asseblief vir die minister om ons as vroue regtig te help in die klein skaal. Ek voel so dat ek as 'n verteenwoordiger van my gemeenskap, ek as 'n vrou wat soveel verantwoordelikheid het, ek as 'n vrou wat my huis moet bestuur, ek as 'n vrou wat voorbereiding moet tref vir my familie, vir my kinders, vir my gesin. Ek rig 'n versoek asseblief om ons te help in die visbedryf met ons regte wat ons het. Ek glo daaraan dat die vroue met erkenning kry vir dit wat hulle doen in ons lewensbestaan. Die wêreld en ons gesinne moet ons respekteer, die gemeenskap moet ons respekteer. Ek saluut die vroue reg daarvan, want hulle doen baie meer werk as wat hulle betaal word voor. En daarom wil ek graag die minister met hierdie live show stream van ons sien, sodat sy kan weet waar ons gaan in hierdie Covid-19 en ook dat ons baie bekommerd is vir die toekoms in die visbedryf.
Baie dankie, Rowena. Baie dankie vir wat jy nou gesê het. Okay, thank you. Just to translate what Rowena said, she mentioned that there are basically 8 points that she mentioned in terms of the impact of COVID-19 on women. She calls it a double threat. It is not just the lockdown that impacts them, but also for women being part of the household, the fact that women not only responsible for food, but also have to be responsible for teaching and educating children now. So extra burdens have been placed on women. She particularly mentioned the significant role women plays in the pre-harvest section in terms of preparing men to go fish, but also in terms of the post-harvest section, how women are in terms of cleaning fish and activities, but more so, women have not just tucked in their community and other communities on the fish itself. They also want to kind of do figs of the land. They use the kelp, they use jewelry that they're making, they use different activities that they are struggling in terms of currently that they used to have a market and currently they don't have a market. So that also adds to the limit of their income. She's also part of she's a woman leader of Coastal Links, a community-based organization, and she speaks about the women in KZN, their challenges in terms of harvesting mussels in the intertidal zone. And in the intertidal zone, they risk fisheries inspectors and officials confiscating their catch, and also risk being arrested. She then moved over to the issue of social grants and the dependency of families, of many in the community that are dependent on the social and the welfare grants. The welfare grants are not sufficient, but it is an important part of how that support people and also their livelihoods. And she mentioned in terms of food parcels, yes, food parcels are distributed in the community, but not everyone gets food parcels. Related to the grant system, it's also saying that not everybody benefits from the grant system. So the need for food, the need for the grant system is to be expanded in terms of is important. She also talked about the challenges currently in buying fish, and in terms of the market. So a key part is the West Coast rock lobster. She's an interim relief permit holder, and because of the Chinese New Year and lockdown and COVID, there's a complete ban on export. That means a complete ban on exporting West Coast rock lobster to China, risking livelihoods of many small-scale fishers. The market agents that are normally around them this time of the year when selling, or the time of selling West Coast rock lobster, they are missing. They are left alone in the lockdown system. She also speak to how this whole process are making them powerless, how it disempower the process of not having sufficient income and not able to be able to get the income that they get before. Like Charles, she's also talking about an interim relief fund. What fund has been allocated to Fisher? No fund has been allocated to support for that loss of income. And she also makes a plea to the Minister, Barbara Cleese, in terms of support in terms of the market, support in terms of their infrastructure, and also not only as fishermen, but also for women particularly. So that is a summary of Rowena's presentation. Rowena, I hope I've done justice to your presentation that you, in terms of the translation and the summary. Next on is Naseegh Jaffer. He's the director of Masifundise Development Trust. Naseegh, please tell us about what is the impact of COVID on your organizational roles. Has it changed? What do you see? What do you hear from communities in terms of what are their major challenges that they've experienced? And maybe also not only in South Africa, because I know you're also quite a global figure. To what extent is this COVID crisis impacting on fisher communities and their livelihoods in different across the continent and also around the world? If you can specifically speak to that. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Moenieba. Thanks, everyone. Ordinarily, I would have said small-scale fishing provides and supports the livelihoods of coastal communities and communities who live off inland water bodies. But with COVID around, there's very little support for the livelihoods. I think one would come close to saying that COVID is bringing about the deadlihoods of fishing communities. It has a major impact, substantial and significant, but within itself, it has deepened the difficulties and the challenges. I mean that communities didn't have problems before. There were difficulties, there were issues, there were challenges, but these were not of the making. Or two, you would see that fishing communities were very self-reliant. Fishing communities were able to make a living of the sea, of the dams and the rivers. They were able to provide food, nutritious food for that matter, for themselves on the one hand, and to share with their neighbors, but moreover to share and to distribute more widely. Now, this is a characterization of small-scale fishing the world over. It is not just in South Africa that small-scale fishing provides livelihoods for coastal communities. It provides food, but it also provides income beyond just food. And this is important because it provides for the whole, an integrated whole life, for living, for access to education, for access to housing, access to water, critically important, and access to health services. So small-scale fishing in that context, represents the completeness, the whole and completeness of communities who live next to the coast and next to water bodies. But the challenge comes from outside. It doesn't come from within communities. Now, where does it come from? What is this outside that brings these problems? The outside is essentially the privatization and the grabbing of the natural resource where these communities make their living from. Now, by grabbing, we mean that the water bodies has been privatized and sold off to commercial companies for their exclusive use. Now, how can you sell the sea or the ocean? You don't really sell the ocean, but you demarcate sections of the water body and you say, in these areas of the water, of the ocean, in these periods of time, only commercial companies can harvest fish. Small scale or communities have no access. So they're being denied access. The ocean and the water bodies is being grabbed away from them. It is being commodified into an economic entity, and a price tag is put on it. So it is no longer the resource for people and for livelihood. And I think an important ingredient of the same principle is how the space along the coastline and it has been taken away from communities and turned into tourist sites, into tourist havens. Again, another form of privatization. And what is potentially a complicated or controversial issue also is the formation or establishment of aquaculture sites or mariculture sites in the ocean, in areas where fishing communities have traditionally harvested or caught their fish. And this leads to extra pressure on the state of health, the state of the healthy state of the biodiversity of the natural resource of the water body. All of that is being altered, which means that the ability to make a living off the ocean, of the natural resource in the ocean, is being further complicated or devalued. So COVID, in many ways, it's a disease. It's a worldwide disease. Nobody expected it. Nobody knows how to deal with it offhand. It is unexpected. But the problem doesn't lie in COVID. The problem lies in what came after COVID. And what came after COVID is governments put in place regulations. And these regulations is where the problem lies. These regulations has now further removed communities from being able to find food and to make a living. But inside the households, it has caused problems, because now that there's no food, there is no family coherence. There are fights, there are arguments, because the father or the mother cannot provide food, the children go hungry. So it creates a huge animosity inside the household. And then in remote rural areas, what is particularly sad is that the regulations that are put in the English language. People do not speak English in the remote rural villages. They do not understand it. So people do not understand what the regulations are. It is foreign to them. And when repression sets in, and this is another important point, because people don't understand, they do what the regs, they do what they ordinarily would have done, then they get arrested and they get hefty fines or imprisoned. So repression is a key net effect of COVID, or impact on, has a key impact on communities. So the important thing then that one would want out of this is, in fact, for government to be conscious of the human rights of fishing communities. This is crucial because human rights is a right that's contained in United Nations declarations and contained in many different instruments adopted across the world through United Nations bodies, but in particularly by the FAO. And in this case, we're talking about the small-scale fishing, which recognizes the importance and the value of small-scale fishing. In fact, one would go so far as saying that if small-scale fishing is the recognized form of providing food to communities, to nutritious food to communities, and sustaining the environment around, then no commercial fishing would be necessary. So that is the value that is given to small-scale fishing, that is given to small-scale fishing. So what should government do instead? I think the commodification is the cause of the problem. But what is making that problem worse, that government has to restrain, is this notion of the blue economy. This notion of turning the water bodies and the ocean into bigger sites of industry, bigger sites of money-making, and bigger sites of commercialization. Because in doing that, what you basically do is saying that to communities, industry can do a better job than what you do, but you allow industry then to create more pollution, to cause devastation to the biodiversity in the water bodies. And this, in a sense, has a long-term close to what small-scale fishing communities does through their practices. So in the end, I think the important thing to emphasize here is that small-scale fishing is, as a whole, protects cultures, protects human rights, protects communities, protects the vulnerable in society. Importantly, it provides food and nutrition, but more importantly, it also builds and holds cohesion within communities, and it avoids negative impact on the environment, like climate change. So in the end, one would want to say that what all of these negative impacts these negative things in the world out there is bad and is devastating for communities, and COVID, or in particular the regulations of COVID, is making it worse. So one would want to say the other option, the other line of action to take is to say recognize culture, recognize communities, because within that there would be an automatic antibody for the COVID problem. I'm not talking health or medically, but for the disease, for the effect of the disease. There's an antidote for it by recognizing the cultural and social interdependence that communities have. I think what is critical at the moment is, despite the problems or the restraint on movement and ability to connect or to meet, it is important that we find creative ways of connecting and communicating and speaking out. Because if we don't speak out to small-scale fishing communities, then we give the space of small-scale to industry, and we cede it to government. We say to government, we allow government to do what they want. And that is that is like committing suicide. So organization is important. Communication is the critical backbone of organization. And here is my last word on this, that if we do not have organization, then we do not have a tool or a medium through which we can express what we want post-COVID. So COVID's not going to be there forever. It's going to be there for a long time. But after COVID, small-scale fishing cannot and should not return to where it was before COVID and where it is now during COVID. It should actually become the mainstay of fishing or of the fishery in the post-COVID period. So in that manner, it can only get there if small-scale fishery has a voice that speaks out, and that articulates a position. And then, to close it off finally, to say that voice and that organization gives agency to fishing communities. It roots them, it gives them identity. It tells the world that small-scale fishing is here to stay. It can't be taken away, it can't be squashed. It ought to be integrated into how food is provided along the coastline and for inland water bodies, and how the marine resources are protected in the process.
Okay, I hear you, Naseegh. I think your internet is slowing down. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Naseegh, for your contribution. Thank you, Rowena, and thank you, Charles. What we're going to do for the next 20 minutes is that we're going to look at the live comments, and we're going to lift up the comments and asking you to kind of respond to some of the comments that have been made. So, Esti, if we can have Tsele Ntane from UCT, I know him, a student in the sector, is asking the question regarding the flow of fish through the usual value chain. Are the big companies still buying? How are the prices? What are fishers able to catch, and langanas to move fish vis-a-vis bumper snooker run? So Charles, I'm going to ask you to answer that question around the snook. Snook is a significant, important species, and the challenges around snook in and the buying and selling of snook during this COVID time. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
The geographical activity of the snook at this moment, it is placed in a northern area along the west coast, which is quite complex in terms of abiding or complying with the COVID regulations in terms of housing, accommodation, those type of things. There is a bit of a fish run, and snook being the mainstay, traditional mainstay of our local fishermen. We now have an opportunity to catch some of those fish and then make a living. Could possibly be a decent living, except for the fact that once the fish is available in the type of amounts or quantums that we see landed, it automatically translates into a lower selling price out of the vessel onto the next person, which is your langana, your marketer, the middleman. And that is where, in this value chain, it's for me a very contradictory value chain system that we have. That the value is no value is added basically, but the price is inflated to end up in the consumer, which is the public. The public buys this fish from the langana, the marketer, who has inflated this price tenfold sometimes, and especially now that snook was being absent for 4 or 5 seasons of our coast. That's also due to another man-made problem that we have by intervention of incoming fish on the outer banks that hits towards our local inshore coastline, but it's being intercepted by trawling activity. So it minimizes the opportunity for our local line fishermen. And then the other challenge was almost half of the line fish licenses have been withdrawn and cancelled. So it leaves much more fishermen looking for an income source, but there is no opportunity because of the limitations on the license. So the vessels carries this, there's less vessels, less crew people, less opportunity to fish. This also adds to an inflation of the prices at the end of the value chain. But what we see, there is fish in the Port Nolloth, Stompness Bay and Lambert's Bay area, and good landings are recorded there on a regular basis. But like I said, everybody cannot be there because of the COVID regulations that has been in place, and justifiably so too, because you also don't want to crowd or overcrowd the areas where there's human activity and traffic. So you want to keep everything safe. The sad part is if these rights was, or if the rights was of a viable in terms of interim relief, the rights was viable enough for everybody to fish in their local areas, it would not be necessary for us to all target or all migrate towards the north, the northern waters, northwestern waters of the coastline to go and fish there. But what this also does is it reduces the price per capita or per fish to the fisherman that actually takes the bulk of the risk and the cost to pass it on. And then we find that when we come to shore, the price of the fish is ridiculous, and we are looked at as the guys that are making the money, when that's not true. It is the middlemen, and this whole industrial system that this government uses.
Can you answer the question? We have a couple of more questions. So what is the relationship specifically around, can you just speak to the issue around the buying of the fish, big companies buying high nutritious food that could go for small scale, where you and Rowena spoke about the need. So what does that link about big fishing companies and then supply more of a middle class market via retail? So can you speak specifically on that question? And then we've got more questions for others. Thank you, Charles.
You see, it is not only the industrial sector that has been doing this type of thing. They've been joined by not only middle class, but the middleman sector. They have created themselves they might micromanage this one on a scale where those people buy on behalf of the big companies. The big companies have the infrastructure, they've got the logistics, they've got all the resources they require to purchase at a bargain price the bulk of this fish, and then they can store it until such time that there is a shortage in the marketplace, and then they release this fish at exorbitant prices to everybody in the market. This also ends up where the ordinary man in the street cannot afford the fish that was generally should have been available to him, traditionally available to him, had it been that everybody could catch the fish. It's open for fishermen to catch, but because of restrictions there as well. But it is the bigger companies, the bigger influential companies that can purchase these things because they've got the capacity, they've got everything to their disposal to do so.
Thank you, Charles. Naseegh, there is a question around organizing, and Esti, it's a question from Mo K. What has the engagement been with government to target programs specifically for women in fishing and coastal communities? For example, the DWS WRC has a program, Women in Water Empowerment Program. So I'm going to give you a chance as part of the organization, but also Rowena, as jy die vraag ook kan beantwoord. Can you keep it short, please? Naseegh, you can start.
That historically and always, even today, fisheries is seen as the stepchild of agriculture. So when the president puts in I don't know how many billions of rand and cash into agriculture, not all of that goes into institutional arrangements and setup for farming. In fishing, that kind of recognition is not given. So what it means is that the role that women play is not recognized and, importantly, not supported in the current period. Because women in small-scale fishery, as Rowena said earlier, particularly play a role in the post-harvest processes. And it is in the post-harvest processes where the regulations becomes more restraining altogether. And there is no effort, no contribution to be able to alleviate that or to make it easier or to support it and entrench it altogether. So government is simply, at the moment during COVID, provides no regulatory support for women in the post-harvest processes.
Thank you, Rowena. Wil jy probeer om die vraag te beantwoord?
Ek dink Naseegh het die meeste gesê, maar ek wil net byvoeg dat ek dink die government enige program waarvan ons as tradisionele kleinskaalse vissers kennis dra vir vroue, especially vir vroue nie. Want die opleiding wat ons al reeds, of die kennis wat ons opgedoen het, verskillende aktiwiteite wat ons gedoen het in die visbedryf, is deur NGO gedoen, deur organisasies soos Masifundise, PLAAS en PLAAS gedoen. Byvoorbeeld soos die juwele, die maak van juwele deur verskillende skulpies as gemaak is, die training wat ons ontvang het, die opleiding wat ons ontvang het, was deur PLAAS gedoen. Die ander opleiding wat ons as vroue om ons te bemagtig ontvang het, was deur Masifundise gedoen. So ek weet nie of daar enige vroue bemagtiging programme is wat die government uitrol nie. En as dit is dit, en ek het nooit daarvan gehoor aan by ons in die plattelandse klein vissersgemeenskappe nie. Daar nie kennis daarvan nie. So ek dink dit sal iets goed wees indien hulle enige programme het vir die vroue om hulle te bemagtig in die government regulasies. Om het uit te rol en dat ons as visservroue dit kan implementeer in onze dorpe. Dat sal iets goed wees, maar soos ek sê, ek het nog government, jy sien die government amptenare regtig in ons dorpies nie. Al wat jy sien is plaaslike munisipaliteite, amptenare wat jy van hoor en ja, verskillende instansies, wat jy private instansies wat jy sien, wat kom klein opleidingsprojekkies doen aan ons dorpe.
Okay, baie dankie, Rowena. She's basically saying no, there has been no government intervention in the same way with Women in Water. The knowledge or the access to opportunities has mainly been through organizations, civil society organizations like Masifundise that have been raising funds to support women empowerment. And there are also many other groups that come, private groups that come in and support the communities. Okay, so the next question is yes, Sibong Gisele. She asked, is there any way to set up a small-scale informal value chain with local shops? So is there, and I think this is more related to a food sovereignty state of and the role that a lot of small-scale fishers play. Often one think that one need to provide the fish to the retail, to the formal market. So is there any way to set up something, and how successful? Charles, I'm going to ask you to answer that question.
Is there an opportunity for our small scale fishers? I prefer to call them artisanal fishers, to access the local markets, or to create or even develop those markets. The problem that we face, or the challenge that we have, is doublefold. We have a red tape bureaucracy on the one side, and certification, which is also another form of exclusion as far as I'm concerned. And then what we have is, we don't have establishments in our communities that would buy this fish, because there is basically no competitive nature in how fish is being distributed or marketed. What we see is the big companies can swamp, or the big industrial sector swamps the local markets. They swamp the chain stores. They swamp all the areas, the outlets. And when we come to approach them, we cannot compete because of the quantums, the little bit we have, and that actually puts us out of the picture of commercialization, or even value adding our product. The sad thing of that is that we also see the deprivation of access to food because of that thing, because it's not everybody that can buy from those shops where we are in the communities, and we are prepared to distribute the food, as we've always done for decades and centuries, is the selling the fish direct to the public. We are battling with that type of thing because of COVID regulations as well, the distancing, the social distancing, and also the gathering of people. So it becomes complicated for us to still manage that system. But it is tough for us to sell to access the local market, which is basically completely dominated by the industrial sector.
Thank you, Charles, for that question. You know, an hour went by so quickly. So we've got one more question that Esti will lift, and this is from our comrade in the north, who has also worked for Masifundise, Carstens Peterson. Thank you for sharing your experiences and analysis. Do you see new opportunities to take the struggle forward in light of the crisis? Our community organizing and strategizing in new ways? Is there a post-COVID vision? Is there an opportunity to do things in new ways and new forms? So this is going to be the last question. Naseegh, I'm asking you to direct that question. I'm giving you 30 seconds, and then I'm giving Charles and Rowena also a chance to chip in. Is COVID an opportunity to look at new forms of strategies, new forms of thinking, new forms of economy? I think an important part for me also, like you mentioned, Naseegh, that I wanted to take up, is that there's no relief fund for small-scale fishers. Agriculture has been prioritized. Other sectors have been prioritized, but not small-scale fishers. Why isn't there an interim relief fund?
Yeah, well, it's unfair to give me 30 seconds for such a huge task. But I think firstly, I said earlier that fisheries is considered or regarded as a stepchild. I think by not considering any support by government is confirmation that even the highest official in the land regards fisheries as a stepchild. And I think it needs to be criticized severely for that. And I do want to say also that I think that with every crisis comes an opportunity. So it is negative, our life is bad, our life is challenging, our people's lives are difficult right now, more so for small-scale sector, but there's a challenge that it provides. And that challenge is in the answer lies in the human spirit of small-scale fishing communities. Their resilience, their ability and keenness to organize and to build solidarity, interconnectedness across communities. And I think therein lies an advantage for what could manifest itself in the post-COVID period, that we could have stronger organization, we could have a people agitating or moving towards building and activating organizations that has become dormant. I think all of that has huge potential now. And moreover, I think in what COVID has done is created a social political consciousness amongst young people. We need to see how we could nurture that in the fishery sector, so that we have young upcoming activists that is newly become conscientized that can play a role, and they will bring so much energy and so much momentum to the sector that I think, the small scale fishery sector will just has the potential to swallow up the fishery. It should be doing that. If it's not going to do it, then I think we are falling short.
Thank you, Naseegh. Thank you for more than 30 seconds. So, Charles, I'm going to ask you to answer in 30 seconds, and Charles is also going to tell me a little bit more. Charles, is this an opportunity? Is it a new form of new ways of doing things?
Sadly, that is not my idea or my thinking. But what it does do is we must use this event or this episode or this period to push far more harder and push and pressure government to return fisheries and coastal resources back to its common property status. The privatization of fisheries, the strategic privatization of fisheries resources and rights over the decades have left our people very vulnerable and exposed to some of the worst things, for example, the COVID-19. It is on the premise of this inequality, this injustice, that we have built this type of small-scale fishing that we have. And it's never going to work. It is obviously going to fail as we go forward, because if the premise, if the basis of policy and legislation is skewed or unequal, the end product cannot possibly become equal. So what we need is government to sit down and abandon this privatization policies, or this policies based on inequality, so that we can then come back into the fore, and through legal recognition, through the restitution of our rights, and also the constitutional protection of those rights, we can then become a credible player in all of this, a stakeholder, and our input can then also benefit communities and coastal populations, and it can then also contribute towards a better management of the resources that we are dependent on. But
thank you very much.
COVID will stay with us.
Thank you. Rowena, kan jy net opsom in terme van die krisis, en is dit 'n nuwe vorm van organisering? Is daar nuwe geleenthede vir julle in hierdie krisis? Wat sien jy as 'n visservrou in van Anderston Bay, en ook van
ek dink op die oomblik is dit moeilik. Op die oomblik is dit moeilik om te sê, omdat ons so gelimiteerd is op ons spesies, en die kleinskaalse beleid vat so lank om in plek te kom. Dit is nou 14 jaar, en dit maak dit eintlik moeilik om te sê. Maar op die ander kant is dit ook vir ons as mens en as vissers 'n bewys dat ons moet anders, ons moet meer uit die boks uit dink, dat dinge soos dit nou aangaan, glo ek nie dinge sal weer terugkeer na normaal toe nie. So dit gee opportunity vir die jongelinge om regtig betrokke te raak in die visbedryf. Maar omdat ons juist beperk word, en mense wat regtig nou huidelik besig is in die visbedryf, word uitgesluit. So dit maak dit nog moeiliker om te dink of om idees bymekaar te sit, om te kyk hoe kan jy almal betrokke maak en hoe kan ons almal brainstorm om hierdie COVID-19 of die toekoms beter te laat vir ons 'n beter lewenstyl te laat gee, of 'n beter inkomste kan genereer, of 'n beter lewensomstandighede, 'n verandering van lewensomstandighede. Maar dan alles hang af van die government, die department. Dit hang af hoe hulle ons as visserye, ons as kleinskaalse vissers erkenning kan gee. Gaan hulle vir ons ons visserregte gee wat ons voor gevra het? Hoe lank gaan dit vat om dit vir ons te gee? Want daar's soveel baie implikasies wat nou ingekom het by hierdie small scale en dit maak dit nog moeiliker. So ja, sou ek sê daar kan nuwe idees kom, daar kan veranderinge kom in jou gemeenskap, maar dit hang af van die departement om ons policy in plek te sit, waarvoor ons al meer as 14 jaar vra, en te kyk hoe gaan hulle dit so gou as moontlik kan doen, en hoe kan ons, wanneer ons mense dit kan gaan implementeer, dat die regte vissers en die mense wie regtig in die visbedryf betrokke is, ingesluit sal word, om 'n goeie policy uit te oefen.
Okay, baie dankie, Rowena. So she's basically saying that the need to implement the small-scale fisheries policy is very important. There could be possibly opportunities in this, but it depends on how. It depends on the government. It depends on the fisheries department. It depends on how they are implementing this. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This was a very thank you Naseegh and Rowena and Charles for also tuning in. It's not a platform that is often equal when it comes to kind of access to data. I'm very much aware of that, Charles, Rowena, and thank you for making time. It's been really illuminating in listening to your voices and listening to your positions as to how COVID-19 has affected your lives and your livelihood and your income, but it's also time to look at what are the new opportunities. This is the third webinar series of PLAAS. Next week we will move to farm workers and to look into farm workers and how it affects their livelihoods. Thank you very much and goodbye. Stay safe.